welcome to the Better Sex Podcast. My name is Deborah Catt, and I am your shameless host. This is the Better Sex Podcast, where we have unfiltered conversations about sex and relationships. These conversations can be very frank and quite explicit, so they might not be appropriate for all audience, so please listen with care. I truly believe that a sexy world creates a happier and a safer world. If you want to do your part, please hit like, subscribe, and comment wherever you get your podcast episodes. So today we are going to dive into the world of my guest, Jana Danielson. So she is... she's amazing. I have to say, she is a new connection, and I have just been so excited. She is an expert on pelvic health, and she is the creator of the Cooch Ball, which I'm going to let her talk about more. But I'm so excited. Today we're going to be talking about how pelvic health affects everything, including and especially your sex life. So, Jana, how did you get here?
You know, Deborah, you have I was one of those girls, firstborn, very A-type that had the plan, right? Like the 10-year plan. And then at 17 years old, I was actually gifted, I'm calling it a gift now, gifted a pain journey. My pain was gut related. And 4 years into trying to figure out what was going on, I'm now 21 years old. I'm on 11 different medications, and my gut pain has become joint pain, chronic headaches, felt like I couldn't get out of bed, and it was also pelvic floor dysfunction. So at 21 years old, without having a baby, I'm not in menopause yet, I am experiencing pain during intercourse with my then fiance, now husband of almost 3 decades. And I was, to put it bluntly, peeing my pants when I was coughing and sneezing. And I just couldn't understand what was happening to my body, why my driver's license showed that I was 21, but I felt like I was, 21 plus 60. I felt like I had aged very, very quickly, and wanted to understand what was going on with my body. And then my doctor told me one day that she believed the pain was in my head and I was seeking attention. And that really cut that lifeline. So now after 6 months of my dark night of the soul, I call it, I dusted myself off and I started figuring out, how do I heal this body? I was newly engaged. I wanted to be a mom. I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and none of that seemed possible with the situation I was in. And, I just found Pilates, and I know we share a love of Pilates, you and I. And 4 months after my first Pilates class, I was off all 11 medications, had no idea how 4 months of movement could heal me when 4 years of being that baton in the relay race between doctors and specialists could not. And I knew at that point that there were other women like me out there, and I found a path to healing and decided I was going to share it.
Beautiful. I'm so curious, what kinds of medications did they have you on?
Well, I mean, I was on, it started as gut, it started as gut pain. My dad as a farmer had Tums antacids within an arm's reach of his, anywhere he was from all of the stress of being a farmer. And so it started out with medication to help with they thought the acid in my stomach. I was on medications because they thought it was becoming, ulcers. And then, you get on, once you get on 3 or 4 medications, now the next layer of medication is to start dealing with the symptoms of the ones higher up the list, right? So, I had medication to help me sleep. I had medication for my joint pain. I had medication for my headaches. So, right, because, these specialists were looking at was like the 3 by 3 inch square of my body that they were a specialist in. They didn't
Mm-hmm.
look anywhere else. So I was, just segmented like a puzzle, and all these medications were for one specific thing. But at the end of the day, nothing healed me because the root cause, truly, I believe, now looking back, 30 years later at 51, was um, anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
It was, when my gut started, my posture changed, right? I was protecting myself from the pain.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't breathe properly. I wasn't pooping properly. I was teaching fitness. I led a seemingly from the outside healthy life. But on the inside, it actually felt like I was dying.
Wow. And so you stumbled into a Pilates class one day, or somebody invited you.
Yeah. I was at the grocery store, checkout line. I saw Madonna on the cover of a fitness magazine and it had the word Pilates splashed across it. I thought it was pilots. I'd never heard of Pilates. And so I bought the magazine and went home. And before even putting the groceries away, I opened up the article. And, Deborah, it was one of those moments where I didn't know it then, but it was like it completely shifted the trajectory of my life. It felt like there were words popping off the page at me. And I
Mm-hmm.
just had this, well, no pun intended, this gut feeling that there was something there for me. And, I went to my first class and almost never came back because I went to the front row with my mat and I scanned the class and I decided right there that I was going to be the best Pilates student in the class.
Mm-hmm.
And if I wasn't front row center and if the class wasn't packed, I would have left because it took me less than a minute to realize I was way out of my element. People were breathing, they sounded beautiful. I was like coughing and choking. My belly wasn't moving like theirs. It was like I compare it to like everybody around me was like this symphony. And I was like, a flute in a grade 5 band. I couldn't do anything. And my instructor approached me after the class and she just put her arms around me and I cried. And all she said to me was, come back on Thursday. And
Mm.
I went back on Thursday, and 4 months, literally to the day, I started weaning myself off my medication probably 2 months in because I started feeling better. And I
Mm-hmm.
would, I would, before Pilates, I would live my life by the clock. I had to take medication at certain times. And if I didn't take it, my pain would escalate radically. And I would be at work, because I just finished my business degree. I'd be at work and I would look and I would think, what? It's 1:30. I was supposed to take this pill at noon. Where is my raging headache or where is my raging gut ache? And so I just started thinking, okay, so what if I stretch this out? Or what if I only took half of a dose? And lo and behold, by Christmas of that year, I was medication free and felt like I had been gifted a new life.
Well, I can certainly relate to the feeling like you want to cry in your first Pilates class. But and I'm so glad that you went back. So you started this journey into Pilates, and what was it that you started learning that started shifting things for you?
You know, well, first of all, I learned how to breathe properly, right? Like, who thinks to themselves, maybe I'm not breathing right. Like I'm living, so obviously I have to be breathing. But I was not breathing. I was breathing to survive. I wasn't breathing to thrive. And when I
Mm-hmm.
learned how to properly use my main respiratory muscle, the diaphragm, when I learned how to breathe, I also learned, or I'll say this, my nervous system also learned that I wasn't in danger all the time, right? Because for 4 years, with my posture, with my shallow breathing, with my, making my fists when I had pain, my nervous system, the poor thing, thought that we were running from a saber-toothed tiger for 4 straight years. And so, what I started learning was because of that, my adrenals never shut off. My stress hormones, my cortisol, my noradrenaline, like literally my body had alarm bells going off for 4 years. And once I started learning proper breath, once I started moving my spine, right? Like it's almost like a dance. My body through the movement, I was communicating to my body that it was okay to chill. It was okay. I wasn't in danger, that we could put our energy into healing. And then my body started changing, right? Like my physical body started changing. People started noticing. And that's really what was like the hook for me with Pilates, because it was an inside out form of healing where I was looking for the white coats and the stethoscope to heal me from the outside in, and it was backwards.
And so how did you end up in the pelvic bowl?
Yeah.
Pelvic
So,
health.
right, you know what? It came from that because I healed my body. I was like, I want to learn more. So I got certified as a Pilates instructor. And then I shifted my career from business consulting. You know, my hobby turned into a business. So I opened a studio and then we expanded it to include an integrated health therapies clinic. So, you know, grew that to a team of 60, a 9,000 square foot facility. And I knew from all my Pilates training that it inherently is great at supporting the pelvic floor. But I was at a conference and there was a urogynecologist from Reno, Nevada he was presenting his latest pelvic floor research. And as a urogynecologist, his job was to do surgery for women who needed mesh pinups for their pelvic floor or slings, right? That was his job. What he
Mm-hmm.
started noticing was 2 and 3 years after some initial surgeries, he was getting the same women back to get the same surgery again. And he started asking questions of his colleagues. Is this happening? The answer was yes, but do your job. You're a surgeon. Do your job and send them on their way. And he believed that that was not right because the
Mm-hmm.
pelvic floor as a group of muscles is just like any other muscle and they need to be trained and kind of communicated to. And so Dr. Bruce Crawford's research that day in Phoenix, Arizona, when he was presenting it, it was like the heavens opened up because what he taught us through his research was that 90% of pelvic floor dysfunction is not a medical issue. It's actually a fitness issue. It's breathing,
Mm-hmm.
it's posture, and it's blood flow. And right there, I was like, it's what? Right? So I was like, okay, at my studio, breathing, check box, posture, check the box, blood flow. I had pelvic floor physical therapists at my clinic, but the question became, how could I work with the pelvic floor in the class setting in a more natural way? I wanted to talk about pelvic floor from a fitness or movement perspective. Nobody in my classes, I would start talking about it, they would get awkward, they would stop making eye contact, and then they would there would be a lineup of women and men waiting to talk to me one-on-one after class. And I was like, how do we hit the unmute button here? How do we start having this conversation? You know, it's not pelvic floor dysfunction is not normal, but it is common. So
Mm-hmm.
how do we start having that discussion or shifting the narrative? And then I started learning things like the incontinence product industry is like almost $20 billion. So women believe, right, that pads are the solution. In a man's body, erectile dysfunction can be linked back to a too tight pelvic floor. So now we're telling men their bodies are broken. They can't satisfy their partner because they can't get an erection. So they go, you know, oh, guess what though? Big Pharma has a solution. Let's take this pill. You'll get an erection. We have no idea how long it's going to last for. And so all of this noise was like spinning in my head. And it took me back to when I was 21, peeing
Mm-hmm.
my pants, having pain during intercourse with my fiance, thinking, I want to do something about this. And I just dove in like majorly into learning about the pelvic floor, worked with Dr. Crawford. He came up to my studio, trained my staff. And that's really, you know, what was the spark that brought me to learning more about this part of our body, talking about it, and then creating the Cooch Ball, and then 2 years later, the Scooch Ball.
I'm going to hop into the cooch and the scooch in just a minute, but I want
Hmm.
to just talk about like what typical pelvic floor therapy looks like.
Yeah.
Because when I had pelvic floor therapy and it was So I had the external and the internal.
Uh-huh.
And I have to say, it was, I think, so internal meaning they were going in through
Intravaginally.
intravaginally. And,
Yeah.
it was as comfortable as I am with my body and as comfortable as I am with this particular part of my body. It was still really challenging,
Yeah.
because for so many different reasons. And I imagine that there's a lot of people who, don't get help here because it's such an intimate thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that is one of the genius pieces around the Cooch Ball.
Yeah.
Um, and on that note, tell us, what is the
Okay.
Cooch Ball?
So, before I tell you about the Cooch Ball, I want to take one baby step back and I want to help people understand what the pelvic floor actually is, because I think a lot of people don't really understand it. So, first of all, every single human being on this planet has a pelvic floor. A lot of men think that they don't have pelvic floors because they don't have the equipment to be able to have a baby, and that's not the prerequisite. Everybody has a pelvic floor. Um, in a man's body, it supports the bladder, the rectum, and the prostate. In a woman's body, it supports the bladder, the rectum, and the uterus. All right. And so think about the pelvic floor in this way. It is part of your core. So the pelvic floor is the floor. Your main muscle of respiration, your diaphragm, is the ceiling of your core. So now we have the floor of the core, the pelvic floor. The ceiling of the core is the diaphragm. And the
Mhm.
cylindrical 360 degrees is actually 4 sets of abdominals. Your six pack, furthest to the, or closest to the skin.
Mhm.
Deeper to that are two oblique muscles that cross like a letter X that twist and turn us, side bend us. But deepest to that is a group of muscles called the transverse abdominis. And it's like they start in our back and wrap to the front. So they're like one of those thick weight training belts or like a corset. All right.
Mhm.
So when you talk about our core, it's a three-dimensional cylinder and the pelvic floor sits at the bottom of it. All right. So when you feel your bony butt bones on your chair, your pelvic floor is sitting in that space. It is actually 14 muscles, not just one. So a lot of people think your pelvic floor is one muscle. It's actually 14 muscles. And so if you were to, for those of you that are watching, I mean, if you're not watching, I'm going to try my best to describe this, but if you put your index fingers together and your thumbs together, it creates almost like this little diamond shape or almost like a spade from a deck of cards. At
Mhm.
your index finger is your pubic bone, and at your thumbs would be where your tailbone would be. Your pelvic floor literally is this diamond type shape. And then, on the left and the right hand side of your hand would be where those sit bones are. So that's your pelvic floor, okay?
So
Essentially,
it looks
that's
like
what it looks like. Yep, it sits like that.
so here's the front, and then here's the
And there's
back.
the back. Yep, and that's what you're sitting on. And some of the muscles are slow twitch. We don't have to go into this in detail, but some are fast twitch and some are smooth. So how these 14 muscles work together is, some of those muscles are required for pooping. Some are
Mhm.
required for when you're lifting weights. Some are required for intercourse. Some are required for delivering babies. But together, they function as this beautiful cauldron, basically, in the body. And so that was my challenge, right? I knew that from Dr. Crawford's research that breath and posture were key,
Mhm.
but my challenge was, how do I get blood flow to that area in a Pilates class? And this is why your experience with pelvic floor physical therapy, that's exactly what they do. They can do it external or internal. So again, for women, it is intravaginally. For men, it is anally. There is only one way in for a guy. And what it is, it's like an internal massage. So it just happens that I went for my pelvic floor. I go once a year for my
Mhm.
checkup, and I just went on the weekend. And so I get an internal examination, and so my therapist goes inside, and she can basically, she swipes her fingers on different muscular on the different muscles, and she gets me to breathe in different ways, and she can feel the contract, and
Mhm.
then she can feel the relax. And there were a few like trigger points almost. Just think of when you get like a knot in your shoulder, right? And you might use the Scooch Ball or you might go for, a massage and get that knot out. Well, the same thing can happen in our pelvic floor. And that's why for a lot of people, when you don't know this information, and I mean, I'm so grateful for you having me here because we are talking about it more. So many people just wave the white flag and believe that this is my life. My life is, pain during intercourse. In fact, I had a client, a young woman, she was newly married. They wanted a baby in the worst way. And she started seeing me, and her words were, Jana, I don't know if my marriage is going to survive because on Wednesdays, in her words, she said, I just build up the courage and I let him buck. And she says, once a week, we have sex once a week, but on Monday, I start getting so worked up because I know how painful it's going to be for me on Wednesday night. But I feel like if I don't allow my husband to have sex with me, that this marriage won't last. And so we worked together, started with breathing. I got her on the Pilates reformer, started with the Cooch Ball work, and fast forward, like it ended up being 12 weeks later, she was drastically different in her pain patterns. She wasn't experiencing pain anymore. She actually quite liked having sex with her husband. And 6 months later, they were pregnant with their first baby. So there are pathways to healing this part of our body, and pleasure shouldn't be optional, right? Pleasure should be a birthright that we all get to experience, and really the pelvic floor plays a huge role in that for men and for women.
Hearing you say that, I just want to pause for just a second because one of the things with the Tantra work and also going internal, doing internal massage, one of the things we run into, you mentioned the trigger points, and it's like you can feel this like rough, hard spot, and oftentimes there's emotion stuck in there.
Sure there is.
And, I know for my work with men, same thing. It's like, there's that place where those muscles get stuck and hard, and I think you've described them as sticky. And there's generally that place of, holding. And so bringing the breath in there, bringing the blood flow, bringing in the relaxation also allows in the pleasure. And I'm so glad that you brought pleasure into the conversation because, I truly believe that these bodies are made for pleasure. Like, if we incarnate for any reason, it's to experience what's possible in the body. And so bringing that pleasure in and allowing for that. So you make this discovery about the blood flow, about posture, about breath, and then what?
Well, and then I'm like, well, and now what, right? So I'm the mom of 3 boys. I literally went to their toy box and started, I straddled foam rollers. That didn't do what I wanted. I sat on their like mini basketballs and floor hockey balls. And what I was looking for was this balance between creating the release in the fascial tissue. Now, fascia is connective tissue. It is almost like a spider web, and there's layers and layers and layers of fascia. And in between these layers, there should be lots of hydration, juicy hydration, blood flow. But the reality is that juiciness goes away, and it's kind of like beef jerky, right? And it stops blood flow from getting to the muscles. And muscles need blood flow to live. It's like we need food and water. Muscles need oxygen-rich, nutrient-rich blood. So my challenge in this idea was, how do I create something that is like, and I use the metaphor of the 3 bears. If the porridge is too hot, if the ball is too hard, it's going to trigger the sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight, flight, freeze. And that's, I lived that for 4 years, right? When I was so sick. So I didn't want to trigger sympathetic because at that point, again, cortisol's pumping, we were in this pain trauma response. And then on the other hand, if the porridge was too cold, if what I created didn't have enough oomph to it, technical word, oomph, it wouldn't create the environment for change. It wouldn't bring that blood flow through that sticky fascia. So I had to find the porridge just right. And so that's what I really set out to do with the Cooch Ball, was to find something that would work for both men and women, that could create a conversation between the body and the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So my next layer of like checkpoints was, everybody's pelvic floor is different. Some people have a pelvic floor that's very weak,
Mm-hmm.
and we call that hypotonic, lacking tone. Some people have a pelvic floor that's very tight, which we call hypertonic. So, and then there's everybody in the middle. So I needed to create, I wanted to create something that worked for anybody, no matter where they were on that spectrum. And almost like it didn't matter. Like, who knows if they're hypo or hyper, and does that matter, right? As long as we can get blood flow there, start getting reconnected back to the body, having the conversation, and bringing that function back online. And so what we did was we took a rubber bladder of a
Mm-hmm.
ball, no pun intended, and then we found this really cool nylon thread. And we wrapped the thread around the bladder in a unique pattern, and then we put the outer covering on it. And it was, it took some iterations back and forth, but I found what worked. I found the porridge just right. So for a man's body or a woman's body, when you sit on the Cooch Ball, if the pelvic floor is too tight, you're going to experience something that I call the ouch factor. All right. So you're
Mm-hmm.
sitting on the ball, on a chair, on the floor. You don't have to get into any kind of like position that the body, if you can't get on the floor, if it hurts your knees, it hurts your back, do it on a chair, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when you're sitting on the ball, the weight of the body on the ball, when the pelvic floor is too tight, when there's a lack of blood flow, when that fascia is, beef jerky, the Cooch Ball essentially becomes that external massage therapist, that when you're breathing on the ball in a diaphragmatic way, and your nervous system is trusting that you're choosing to be on this ball, even if there is some ouch factor or a lot of ouch factor, as long as your breath is your guide, your body is going to be responding to the interaction with the ball as you breathe. On the other hand, if the pelvic floor is too weak or lacking tone, when you sit on the ball, it actually gives your brain a piece of biofeedback. So now, when you're doing the breath work, it's like it's like your pelvic floor is doing push ups. It's getting stronger because it has something underneath it to lift away from.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the beauty of this simple tool, like the technology. You don't have to plug it in. You don't have to recharge it. You can deflate it if you got to throw it in your suitcase. It really is bringing people back to the simplicity of the body is brilliant, and sometimes we just need to inspire it to heal, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's a little tool like this.
And how do you use it? So, in terms of like, do you suggest a daily practice? Do you suggest how do you suggest using it?
Yes. So, like, it becomes part of your lifestyle. It really does. And you work up to 3 minutes. I always say this to my community. We have 1,440 minutes every single day. You deserve to take 3 minutes of that day, and you can stack it. Okay. You can stack it into your day, meaning when you're watching Netflix at night, sit on it. When you're on a Zoom call, sit on it. No one knows you're on it, right? There's so many ways you can build this into. You're doing your prayer and meditation, sit on it, right? Um, and I'll have people say to me like, "I'm doing so much better. Like, sex is better, or I'm not getting up at night as often to pee, or I'm getting 20 extra yards off the tee in my golf game because now my hips are more relaxed, because that's a pelvic floor thing as well."
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, "Am I good?" And I'll sometimes, depending on how cheeky I want to be, I'll say to them, "Well, would you brush your teeth once a month and hope that you had good dental hygiene? Or would you wipe your bum just once a week and be like, it's good, I wiped it once. Why do I have to wipe it every time?" Right? So, yes, it's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle product. And, most people think that the pelvic floor is about leaking
Mm-hmm.
and pain.
Mm-hmm.
And there is so much more to it. So, chronically tight hips, constipation, bloating, cold, tingly feet, low grade back pain, jaw tension, plantar fascia, like these are all things that plug into the pelvic floor. And because our body is systems of systems, but
Mm-hmm.
yet we see it as like potato head dolls. We have pieces, we have sexy arms for date night and strong arms for gym night. We're not potato head dolls. We are humans that have systems that rely on other systems. And so it is a daily practice, and the more consistent you can be, the more benefit you will just continue to amplify the benefit of this little tool.
Yeah, thank you. And then
Mhm.
I know that you started with the Cooch Ball, and then came the Scooch Ball.
Then
So
came, yeah, her little sister, the Scooch Ball. So she came about 2 years later, and what I realized as I really like to like geek out on all of this because I just think that people just deserve to know. Like, we can't turn back the hands of time, but we can damn well slow them down, right? And so, what I was through my additional research and curiosity is I started reading about how connected the plantar fascia, so the fascial tissue at the bottom of our feet and our foot health, how connected that is to our pelvic floor, how connected like TMJ and jaw tension is to our pelvic floor. And it's kind of like a chicken and the egg. What happens? Did the pelvic floor tension come and then we started gripping our jaw? Or did our plantar fascia happen and then the pelvic floor responded? Who knows, and actually who cares? We know they're connected, so we know when we start working these things as a group that
mhm.
we're going to have major return on that investment. So the Cooch Ball didn't quite create the sensation I wanted. I wanted something that could get into the little nooks and crannies, in and around the jaw, in and around, in through the glutes, the bottom of the feet, the hands. And so that's when the Scooch Ball was born. And what a lot of people, they'll see it and they'll be like, well, I'll just use a lacrosse ball or I'll just use a tennis ball. And I'm like, well, okay, but I wanted this specifically again for the tissues of our body, and I really built this around the response from the nervous system because lacrosse balls might feel good in the moment, but they have no tensegrity. There's no give to them. So again, coming from the girl who had alarm bells going off in her body for 4 years, I know how quickly that nervous system can like turn on like a Christmas tree. And so there's the tiniest bit of squish to this ball
Mhm.
helps the nervous system trust that the work that you're doing with your body with the ball is safe. And then the nervous system will just be like, all right, you got this. And the impact on the body is really amazing with it.
So I learned about the Scooch Ball on Instagram with your video about
Was it Death Begins in Your Big Toe?
it was death begins in your big toe. And what I found actually, if I'm truly, when I first learned about it, was I was on a retreat and somebody, uh, my roommate actually had a Scooch Ball. And she was showing me how like you put your toes on it and you go back and forth and how that relaxes the feet. God, that's so funny. I
Yes.
just remembered that. But anyway, so not too long ago, or not too long after that, I ended up seeing Death Begins in the Big Toe, and I'd love to have you talk a little bit about
Yes.
what do you mean by that?
Yeah, okay. I ruffled a lot of feathers with that video. And what I simply mean by it, and it's actually true because circulation is really pivotal to longevity. Like our blood flow carries the nutrition for our body. And when we are not moving, when we're not keeping our circulation at a, level that can support us in everything we do during our day, we don't notice it, but it just starts to slowly decrease. And we chalk up the extra little back pain or maybe that bursitis or we chalk that up to aging and we just well it's aging, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that our big toes are geographically the furthest in our body from our heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had people fighting me like, it's a little toe. And I'm like, whatever. It's still, right? So you can look at your big toe, and if your
Mhm.
big toe is numb, or it's a little bit discolored, or it's lost its nice aligned position, and you have maybe a bunion, or you've got plantar fasciitis, or you've got hammer toes, right? Those like kind of Frankenstein toes. Um, that is not just aging. That is a function of a series of tissues in the foot, muscle, fascia, nerve tissue, that you've essentially been depriving of nutrition. It's been suffocating, it's been asking you and asking you. And sometimes the body asks via pain and discomfort. And we ignore it and we ignore it and we ignore it until it gets loud enough, like it starts as a whisper, and then
Mhm.
it gets to that, temper tantrum where we can't ignore it. It's impacting our life. We can't sit for very long. We have to wear different shoes. We're, getting over the counter pain medication. We're putting topicals on it. And that's really what I meant by it, is that if your big toe is being impacted, again, in those ways that I told you, it's like a snowball rolling downhill. It's just going to start to impact more of the tissues in the foot. And then it's going to start impacting our calf. We call our calf muscle, the back of the leg between the knee and the heel, our secondary heart. So, slowly
Wait,
we
what?
start. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of research that calls the calf. So there's two parts of the calf muscle: the meaty part called the gastroc, that's right below the knee, and then the
Uh-huh.
narrower part called the soleus. So the soleus plays into the Achilles tendon, which comes underneath the foot and attaches into the plantar fascia. So when our calf muscle, and most of us have very tight calves, not strong, but tight, because of the footwear that we wear. We even
Mhm.
running shoes have a bit of an incline. Never mind, I love myself a good high, a nice heel, peep
Uh-huh.
toe heel. I'm all about that, right? But when we're wearing those things on our feet, and I was working with an osteopath from New Zealand, and Dr. Philip Beach, he used to call shoes sensory deprivation chambers, right? He would say, we got to take off those sensory deprivation chambers when we get home. So that's when the calf is the gastroc and the soleus, when they're not juicy, when they're not pliable, dynamic muscles, it's really hard for the body, because guess what? The body has to pump blood from the feet back up to the heart against gravity. That's a
Mhm.
really big job, right? So
Mhm.
when the calves are like a barrier to that, we're not getting the reoxygenation of our blood like we should. And again, that's when we get the cold, tingly feet. That's when we get the numbness. And well, my feet have always been cold. I had one woman say, my husband will never let me touch my feet to his legs in bed because my feet are always ice cold. Well, that's a circulation issue, right?
Mhm.
So that's why the calf muscle, and so using the scooch ball under the calf is a really great way to just start to relax that, so that there can be this more effective blood flow exchange from the heart to the rest of the body.
So, what I was so struck by with this idea, when you talked about the foot, the fascia at the bottom of the foot coming all the way up the back, and being, part of like what creates migraines. I would love you to talk more about that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, like I said, I mean, fascia gives our body shape, okay? It's like a spider web. It starts at our feet, and it's the entire body. And it doesn't have like a start and an end, like a muscle will start, if we look at our bicep, it starts at the elbow, ends at the shoulder. Well, fascia is not like that, all right? Fascia is this beautiful webbing, and there is one major piece of fascia called the superficial backline. And it starts under our feet, it comes up the back of the legs, behind the knee, and then it continues from through the hamstrings at the back of the leg, the glutes. It goes up either side of the spine, comes up and over our skull, and attaches kind of under where the eyebrows would be in the sockets of the eyes. All right. So imagine that, like that one long piece of fascia from the feet to the eyes. All right. So let's imagine like those, when you see at a gym, those TheraBands, those really stretchy bands that you use. Okay. So imagine there's that big long line, And now imagine that maybe during the day you start to slouch a little bit, or you're in a relationship where maybe you're not feeling heard or acknowledged, and we start to live small, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and now imagine that long, stretchy TheraBand is it doesn't need its length anymore because you've trained it that instead of being 5'4", we sit and we live like we're 5'2", and the fascia is like, oh, I don't have to be this long. I can be a little bit shorter, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now that it's shorter, it starts to pull on the end points, the feet or under the sockets. So now, and let's add in the fact that maybe you're a little bit over caffeinated. You really like your caffeinated drinks and you're a little bit dehydrated and your in-laws are coming to visit and that always stresses you out and the kids are going back to school or you're having, that man in your bed is like all the way on the other side of the king size bed and you're trying to figure out what's going on with that. And so we layer on some of this emotional stuff as well. Well, now that line of fascia that was 5'4" that went to 5'2", maybe it's now even more condensed. Maybe it's like 5 feet. So it's going to start pulling on us. And instead of having a nice kind of parallel chin to floor posture, maybe our posture starts looking like this or like this. And we start pulling in areas that shouldn't be pulling. And the result is tension headaches at the brow line, tension headaches at the hairline. You might have those moments where you feel like your eyes are just sinking into your head, light sensitivity. So that's what actually starts to happen. And so, how do we counteract that? We improve our hydration, we start to move our body, we use tools like the Scooch Ball, get into our feet. There's so much that we can do on our own. And yes, I love a good massage. I love a good acupuncture and chiropractic treatment. So when you bring all those together with this knowledge, that's why I say to my community, we can't like literally turn back the hands of time, but we figuratively sure can. And I can say with confidence at 51 years old with 3 grown boys compared to the 21-year-old version of myself, I am like way healthier than I ever have been because I understand I have a conversation with my body all the time. When she starts getting a little bit cranky, I stop and I give her some love. I might, do extra Scooch Ball or I might, get on my Cooch Ball and do my gut, work in addition to my pelvic floor work.
It's so funny hearing you say that, slowing down and listening to your body and asking what it needs. That's how that's how I got into Pilates is
Mm.
I was like, okay, body, what do you want? What do you need? And I heard Pilates and I was like, are you kidding me? Like, because I had this whole story about what it was and who goes and everything else. And, that's not me. But having a practice of listening to the body, of moving the body, has made a huge difference. And in my personal life, my partner and I go together, and that has just absolutely rocked our world.
Hmm.
You know, I always knew that it was important to have these kinds of, movement connections with your partner, but I was really like the effect that it's had on our relationship is just really transformative.
Mm.
So not
That's
only are we
amazing.
transforming the body, but transforming the relationship as well.
Yeah.
And one of the things you've mentioned a couple times, and I want to dive into just a little bit deeper,
Hmm.
is the idea of community and the idea particularly around these practices. Do you want to talk a little bit about your community?
Yeah. So I feel like when it comes to, the majority of my community is women. However, more men than ever are really starting to start to connect with the work that I do. And so I feel like as women, we are stronger when we are in community, when we can be vulnerable, have somebody, dust us off, straighten our crown, keep us going. That to me is really, really key, especially when it comes to this part of our body. We have become so conditioned again to believe the myths that just because we're women of a certain age, it's this downhill trajectory, and that this is how my mom went through maybe perimenopause and menopause, or how my grandma went through it, so that means that that's how I have to go through it. And so I feel like there's such a strength when you see women, like you can actually, and maybe not see it all the time if I'm not with them, but I can hear it when they send me messages. Like, you can tell when those light bulbs start going off, like, what? You did what? Or, I did this for the first time. Like, it's really, it's one of those value propositions that I think community often gets overlooked. And
Mm-hmm.
especially through COVID, right? We were the opposite of community. We were, individuals, and some of us got very used to that. However, now it's time to come back. So I mean, I do have some free communities on Facebook, um, and then an up-leveled, full experiential community with the Cooch Ball and the Scooch Ball, with the Cooch Club and monthly coaching calls that really inspire women. Because what my hope is that I can make an impact on women so that they get to impact the other women in their lives, whether it's their friends or their sisters or their daughters. And imagine a world in 30 years from now where women are speaking about this, where they're not looking down, embarrassed to go down the grocery aisle with the incontinence products. They don't need those anymore. I mean, there's a purpose for them, yes, but they're not long-term solutions. Imagine a society of men that have the confidence to know that, they're able to get an erection when they want to, that they don't have to take that pill, how they learn when they breathe properly, they trigger the creation of nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator, which helps with like, there's just so many. And I mean, I can share stories like, you know, young girls that want to go to their best friend's birthday sleepover in the worst way, but they're 11 years old and they're still wetting the bed. That very much is a pelvic floor issue, right? I've had moms come to me and the Cooch Ball has helped them. I've had, couples in their 90s. I had a phone call one time a few years back with a woman from New York City, and her husband was turning 91. And she said to me, Jana, he's just not as spunky in the bedroom as he used to be. So can men use the Cooch Ball, right? So, there's the entire spectrum of, the Cooch Ball doesn't really discriminate. And so when you can add the layer of community on top of that, it really goes a long way to just amplifying the experience.
Beautiful. So I'm curious. So for somebody who's listening and wants to, like, what do you have, like a tip or a technique or something that we could practice and share with them so that they can complete the call and try it?
Yes, yeah. So the one thing you can do today that doesn't cost you anything but a little bit of time is the diaphragmatic breath. So remember I told you earlier when we built the core that the pelvic floor is the floor, the diaphragm, the main breathing muscle, is the ceiling. Well, here's one thing that I didn't mention in that explanation is that the ceiling and the core are best friends. And the ceiling is kind of like the leader. She's the influencer, or he's the influencer. So whatever the diaphragm does, the pelvic floor is going to do. So if the diaphragm is not part of the breath function,
Mm-hmm.
the pelvic floor is just going to chill out, not going to move at all. So until we actually learn to breathe properly with our diaphragm and get that, the diaphragm's like it looks like a mushroom cap or an open umbrella. It sits in the crest of the rib cage. And so should we do a little demo of the diaphragmatic breathing?
Yes, please. Let's
Okay,
do
let's
it.
do that. So obviously, unless you're driving, place one hand on this flat bone in the center of your chest. It's called the sternum, and then the other hand goes on your belly button. All right. So let me frame it this way. We're going to do 3 breaths in through our nose and out through our mouth. In through the nose like we're smelling a fresh baked apple pie, and out of our mouth with the jaw slightly relaxed, almost like an HA sound, like we're fogging up a bathroom mirror, okay? So let's do those 3, and All I want you to do is breathe, and I want you to pay attention to which hand moves more, top hand or bottom hand. Then we'll move on to part 2. So let's begin. Inhale through your nose. Exhale out of your mouth. Twice more. Inhale through your nose. Exhale out of your mouth. And one more time. Inhale through your nose. Pay attention to the hand that's moving more. Exhale out of your mouth. All right, Deborah, since you're here with me, which hand is moving more, top or bottom?
For me, it was the top.
Okay. So lovingly, you are like one of my little goldfish. All right. And why I call you one of my little goldfish is because the body, remember, I keep saying the body is brilliant. The body is brilliant. Well, when we don't breathe with our diaphragm, the body's like, okay, I'm still going to keep him living. I'll still keep her living. But it reassigns the work of the breath to our neck muscles. There's 2 little muscles in the neck called the scalenes and the sternocleidomastoids. All right. They're like 2 little pillars. But guess what? And they'll do the job of breathing. They're not awesome at it. But guess what? They already have a job. They hold this bowling ball on top of our spine. So now these little muscles that hold this 8 to 10 pound bowling ball also are breathing like 20,000 plus times a day, 22,000 times a day, I think on average we're breathing. Now you're asking them to do that. So that's why I said you're like my little goldfish, because essentially you're using your gills to breathe. And so what we want is the bottom hand to be moving more. When the bottom hand moves more, that's how you know with confidence you're using that mushroom cap or that open umbrella muscle to do the breath work. All right. Let's do that again. 3 breaths. I'm going to give you some new words to focus on when you're doing this. So again, 1 hand on the sternum, 1 hand on the belly button. As you inhale through your nose, I want you to fill the waistband of your pants with your body. Inhale. And as you exhale, I want you to pull away from the waistband of your pants on 360 degrees as the belly button melts back toward the spine. All right. Do that again. Inhale. Fill your waistband. Fill your waistband. Fill that bottom hand with air. And on the exhale, narrow through the body on 360 degrees as if your torso was like a soft bark tree. Everything melts inward. One more time, in through the nose. And on the exhale, relax the jaw. Let the upper jaw come away from the lower jaw. Okay, talk to me about that one.
That was so different. That was so different. I really felt like, into the belly. And what's so fascinating is when you were talking about these muscles, I have a chronic tight neck.
Yeah.
And so, I've always, so I had no idea I wasn't breathing correctly.
Yes. So that will correct itself. That will fix itself now that it's like you're sending a text message to your diaphragm being like, hey, remember when we watch a newborn baby breathe, their belly rises and falls. You're not going to breathe this way 24/7, but when you have the time to practice this and build that muscle back in the diaphragm, you're going to be well on your way. You're going to notice, give yourself, it might take a little bit of time to unwind the chronic tension in the neck, but you'll see how that is going to completely start to undo itself now that you know how to properly breathe. Now, the other thing that's really cool is if you start doing this after today's show, you're going to be taking in 600% more oxygen. So your cells are going to love you because they're going to bathe in all this amazing oxygen. The brain fog that might be plaguing you could be a lack of oxygen around the brain. You're giving your parasympathetic nervous system a hug, which means those stress hormones are going to chill out. There's going to be a balance to other, those feel good, yummy oxytocin hormones in your body. You're going to sleep better. There's just so many benefits to this simple thing. So that is the one, if you just took one thing away from today's show, that is the action item that I feel has the biggest return on investment for the shortest amount of time required.
Wow, I'm so glad I asked because I always thought I was a good breather, but I didn't realize I wasn't really getting down into the belly. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. You're welcome.
So I know that you have another really special free gift for folks. If you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about the ebook.
Yeah. So the Healthy Pelvic Floor ebook is, I would say it's like a collection of dipping your toe. It's like the Costco, let's say it this way, it's like the Costco sampler of the pelvic floor world. Okay. You know how you're not sure if you want to buy the 10-pound bag of the sweet potato crackers. So you have like, you taste it, then you decide to buy the whole bag. This is exactly that. So it's going to, it's not like it's 50 or 60 pages. I think it's like 10 pages, and it's going to show you a lot of what we covered today. But a lot of my community, how they use that is kind of like their baseline. It's where their curiosity gets piqued,
Mm-hmm.
and where through the ebook, you know how when you believe that no matter, it doesn't matter, it's just how my body is, it's not going to, I've tried everything and nothing's worked. This could be that thing that resonates with you in a very different way. And, and I hope it does. I hope it cracks you open a little bit to become curious about your body, to understand that the body simply needs it's not like you're going to be teaching it anything new. You're just helping the body remember. And that's what this information is about. And you know what, gang, because I'm not a pelvic floor therapist or a naturopath, or you know I am like a Pilates instructor that had to learn this from the ground up until I understood it. So that's what I find, the people who work with me are like, I've never heard it like that, or I've never, right? And that's because I've had to like break this down into like digestible little pieces for me to
Mm-hmm.
understand so that I can help other people understand their body. I think sometimes we see doctors and specialists and they use these great big words, and I would always have clients come to me at my studio and they would say things like, I have a bulging disc between L4 and L5, and I like they would use all these big words, and I knew that they didn't know what the heck they were saying. It was just words from their doctor, and that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't serve, that doesn't inspire us, that doesn't educate us. And so that's what this ebook is meant to do, is pique your curiosity and crack this pelvic floor conversation open a little bit.
Beautiful. And if you're ready to jump into something a little bit deeper, do you want to tell them about the Cooch Ball bundle?
Yes, yeah, for sure. So the Cooch Ball bundle that, so Deborah, are you going to tell me, will this be like the intimacy bundle? Is that where you want me to go with this? Because I know there's a few different options that you have. Okay, perfect. Okay, so because you're here in Deborah's community and you're listening to her podcast, you are the perfect fit for the invitation to the intimacy bundle. And so the intimacy bundle is new to the Cooch Ball universe. What I did was I built out an experience essentially, right? And it's something you can do from the comfort of your home. You get the Cooch Ball, you get the pump, and then you get a kind of a back end experience in my community. So imagine walking into a library that was all pelvic floor and health related. I'm going to show you very simply, I'm going to show you how to blow up your ball. If you blow it up too much, I'm going to show you how to take air out of it. I'm going to show you how to sit on your ball, how to breathe on your ball. We're going to do something fun called Cucholates. So there's some workouts that come with this. In this specific experience, and Deborah, you and I both have a soft spot for Susan Bratton, and so Susan and I did a 3-part video series on intimacy and the pelvic floor. And then there's this beautiful collection of resources called the Climax Collection. So there is like this, eating for your libido. There's a whole ebook on nutrition. There's a really cool piece or a really cool asset back there, which essentially, you know how you can get a reflexology map for your feet and you press here and that's your gallbladder, or you press here and those are your lungs. Well, it's like a reflexology chart for women for their vulva, right? And
Hmm.
so there's lots of like other checklists and meditations, and there's some relationship date ideas and things like that. And then what you get in that bundle, which I think is makes this a no-brainer, is you also get lifetime membership with me in the Cooch Club. And the Cooch Club includes monthly live coaching calls. So we get online every single month. If you can't make it live, you get the replay in your community library, and that is the bundle. And the women, my pioneers that have just said yes, because like I said, this is a brand new experience. I'm getting really great feedback. The community is very vibrant, and you know we're they're impacting their lives and the lives of their partners, and that's just it's so beautiful when you can see a woman become educated and inspired, and her sensuality comes back, and she's walking around with more confidence, and she buys the tighter jeans, and she's just like owning the essence of her divine feminine.
I'm giggling because I just bought a new and exciting swimsuit.
Okay.
It's yeah, so for summer, so I'm very excited about that. And I'm so excited that you're here. We will put the links that we just discussed in the show notes. And just if there's one thing that you want somebody to walk away with, what might that be?
It's just, and I've said it earlier, but I want to reiterate it because it's so important, because so many men and women have just become so disconnected from their body because it's disappointed them, right? It's frustrated them, it's let them down. And coming from somewhere who has lived that, know that there is something beautiful on the other side of this curiosity. Our body was meant to live pain-free. Our body was meant to enjoy pleasure. Our body was meant to thrive. And, there's the physical aspect of what we're talking about. There's also, we've alluded to the emotional aspect. Sometimes someone will sit on the Cooch Ball and just start crying, right? As they melt through those restrictions and those emotions that they have suppressed for so long. So the physicality, the emotionality, and then of course, again, that magic cauldron, the energy, the sensuality, the creativity. Understand that, this isn't just the part of our body that we use when we have sex. We use it when we poop and pee and run and jump and sit, and everything we do involves the pelvic floor. And so I hope that I've given a little spark of intrigue into this conversation. Deborah, thank you so much for having me.
Oh my God, I'm so thrilled that you're here. And I feel like I've got 10 million more questions just in our last little piece here. But I'm going to pause this for now, and hopefully you'll come back again. And how do we find you? Where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, you know what? I'm on all the socials at Jana.Danielson. So Jana.Danielson. That's the best, really, like Instagram, TikTok, my YouTube channel. Bloombetter.life is kind of my overarching women's wellness brand. You can also check out some of the other goodness that I have going on in women's health there as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. So again, that was Jana Danielson on all of the socials, bloombetter.com.
.life.
Bloombetter.life. And highly suggest that you follow her, that you check her out. I'm a big fan of the Cooch Ball. And we didn't really get to talk much about it, but that it'll be in the show notes if you want to hear about Coachella. And that'll be all over the socials as well. So again, thank you so much. I am so excited that you're here. And please, again, follow her on the socials. And if you want to help bring more love and better sex into the world, if you know somebody who's got any kind of pelvic floor issues that this might help them, please send it on, share it widely, and please subscribe, like, and comment, because it really helps us get the word out about all of this good stuff. And so again, thank you so much, Jana. And bye for now.